Welcome back to the deep dive. We are recording this in December 2030, and if you are anywhere near Columbia right now, specifically if you take a walk down by the stadium or, over near the operations building, the vibe is it's distinct.
It is. It's really different from what you'd normally expect this time of year.
Absolutely. The bowl equipment is being unloaded from the trucks. You see players heading off for a brief, well-earned break. And usually this is the time of year when the noise in this town is just deafening. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. The absolute chaos.
The transfer portal panic, the recruiting hype machine just spinning completely out of control, the radio callers shouting about how next year is definitely our year.
The usual chaotic off-season chatter. It's almost a tradition in itself, isn't it?
It really is. But looking through the reports on my desk and just the mood checks coming out of the program, and I don't mean a lack of energy, it's a lack of anxiety. We are looking at a South Carolina team that just finished the season, 10-3 overall, went 6-3 in the SEC, and secured a top 15 finish. But the notes I have in front of me suggest something bigger than just the win-loss column.
It's the difference between a hot streak and a structure. I think
Yeah.
that's the best way to put it. When you look at the internal reviews and the advanced metrics we've pulled, the phrase that keeps coming up isn't rebuild.
No.
It's foundation. And I think we need to define that right at the top, because in college football, rebuild is usually just a polite euphemism for we lost a lot of games and don't know why.
Right. It's the standard excuse you use in year one to buy time. Oh, don't worry, we're rebuilding. It just lowers the bar for everyone.
Precisely. A rebuild implies you're patching cracks in a sinking ship, trying to keep the water out.
Uh-huh.
A foundation season, which is exactly what the data suggests 2030 was, is about pouring concrete.
That's a great analogy.
It's boring, it's heavy, it takes time to set, but it supports massive weight. That 10-3 record wasn't luck. We're going to look at the advanced stats today, the success rates, the third down efficiency, the defensive gap integrity. These numbers prove the concept of head coach A.C. Jordan's system works in the SEC. This wasn't a team that scraped by on gimmicks. It was a construction project that finished phase one way ahead of schedule.
And we have a massive stack of sources to get through to prove that. We have the game recaps, the internal program reviews, the national media reaction. We are going to break down that decisive Armed Forces Bowl victory, which was a statement in and of itself.
A huge statement.
We're absolutely going to go back to Death Valley and deconstruct how the Gamecocks finally took back the Palmetto Series, a game that I think shifted the entire timeline of the program. And we are going to look at personnel numbers that are frankly historic.
The numbers are eye-popping, especially quarterback. I mean, they're just staggering. But what stands out to me isn't just the stats, it's the trajectory. We need to look at how the national perception of South Carolina has shifted from August 2030 to December 2030. It's a completely different world.
It really is. But before we get to the big picture and the future, let's start with the last thing we saw, the closing argument, the Armed Forces Bowl. Because before we even talk about the final score, we have to talk about the narrative minefield this game was.
Oh, it was the classic psychological trap. You have to contextualize where the team's head was at. South Carolina finished ranked number 13. They were the very first team left out of the 12-team playoff bracket.
The first team out.
That is a heartbreaking, just a gut-wrenching spot to be in. You're angry, you feel snubbed, you feel like the committee got it wrong.
And then the football gods, or, the bowl selection committees, decide to add a layer of drama. Who do they draw? Georgia State.
The team A.C. Jordan built.
The team he recruited, the team he left to come to Columbia. Narratively, this was so dangerous. You have the disappointment of the playoff snub, combined with the emotional baggage of the head coach facing his former players.
And Georgia State was good. They were coming in as the American Conference champions, a 10-win team. They were looking for a scalp. They wanted to prove they didn't need Jordan to win. That was their Super Bowl.
It sounds like the perfect recipe for a flat performance. The classic, we didn't want to be here bowl game, where the power conference team sleepwalks and gets completely embarrassed.
We see it every single year. A team feels too good for the bowl, they treat practice like a vacation, and they lose to a motivated group of 5 champs. But when you look at the game film from Fort Worth, South Carolina didn't play with emotion. They didn't play with anger.
No.
They played with a terrifying level of professional detachment.
Clinical is the word that kept coming to mind when I was looking at the drive charts. The final score was 49-14. The offense put up 491 total yards. But the stat that blew my mind, and I need you to break down how this happens, was the red zone efficiency. They went 5 for 5 inside the 20. 5 trips, 5 touchdowns, no settling for field goals.
That is the ultimate indicator of focus. In bowl games, practice schedules are weird, you're in a hotel, the timing is usually off. Offenses typically stall out in tight spaces because the precision just isn't there.
Field shrinks.
The field shrinks, windows get tighter. To go 100% touchdown efficiency in the red zone speaks to the play calling and the preparation. AC Jordan didn't force the ball into tight windows just to make a play. They used Tyler Abraham effectively on those outside zones to stretch the field horizontally.
Which opens up the seams.
Exactly. When you force the defense to defend the width of the field near the goal line, you create natural creases for the quarterback. And Jermaine Paul was absolutely surgical in exploiting that.
Let's talk about Jermaine Paul in this game. 21 of 26 passing. That's nearly 80% completions in a bowl game against a conference champion. 301 yards, 3 touchdowns.
And it wasn't just checkdowns to pad the stats. That's the key. People will see a high completion percentage and think, oh, it was all dink and dunk. No.
Not at all.
There was that 58-yarder in the second quarter that effectively broke Georgia State's back. I watched the All-22 tape on that play. Paul manipulates the safety with his eyes, holds him in the middle of the field for just a beat, and then drops a dime down the sideline. That throw doesn't happen if you aren't completely locked in.
No way.
If you're thinking about the playoff snub or if you're thinking about your vacation next week, you missed that throw. You overthrow it or you underthrow it. That was pure focus.
You mentioned Tyler Abraham earlier. He has been the bell cow all year, but this game, I mean, the stats are almost comical. 9 carries, 119 yards, 3 touchdowns. That is averaging over 13 yards every single time he touched the ball.
It's dominance. But it's also a credit to the offensive line. To average 13 yards a carry, you aren't getting touched until you're 4 or 5 yards downfield.
That's a sign of a great line.
They were moving bodies. They were creating huge lanes. And again, Georgia State was an 11-win team. This wasn't a scrub defense. They had guys who could play. South Carolina simply out-executed them physically and mentally.
We talked about the narrative danger that this could have been sentimental for Coach Jordan, but the sources say the staff didn't let the game drift into sentimentality at all.
No, and that's crucial for the culture moving forward. It had to be a business trip. If you were building a program that expects to compete for SEC championships, you can't get caught up in the coach knows the other player's storyline. You have to treat the opponent like a faceless obstacle.
And the defense did exactly that.
They did. They were just as clinical as the offense.
The defensive numbers are stifling. I mean, they held a conference champion to 60 rushing yards.
60. In modern college football, if you hold a team to 60 rushing yards, you are winning 99% of the time. It renders the play-action pass completely useless. It forces them to be one-dimensional. It lets your pass rushers just pin their ears back and go.
And who stood out to you on that side of the ball?
I was watching the defensive line play, specifically Christian Falk.
Senior defensive tackle.
Right, playing in his final collegiate appearance. He recorded a sack and a tackle for loss, but his impact was on every single snap. He wasn't just eating blocks. He was resetting the line of scrimmage 2 yards back into the backfield. When you disrupt the mesh point between the quarterback and running back that fast, the run game never gets started.
So even on plays he didn't make the tackle, he's wrecking the whole thing.
He's blowing it up from the inside. It was a send-off performance for him, but it was also a message to the younger guys on that line. You know, this is how you finish a career. You go out and you dominate.
So the bowl game was the closing argument. It proved the team could handle success and handle disappointment professionally. But if the bowl was the exclamation point, the turning point of the entire season, the moment where year one went from good to, well, legendary, was the Palmetto Series.
November 30th, 2030, Death Valley.
I get chills just thinking about the context here. South Carolina hadn't won this game in 3 seasons. Clemson was ranked number 2 in the country. They were 10-1. They were marching toward the playoff, essentially looking at this game as a warm-up lap.
A tune-up. They thought it was going to be a tune-up before the ACC championship and the playoff. And South Carolina walked in with a rookie head coach on the road at night. If you looked at the Vegas odds, if you looked at the history, this was supposed to be a Clemson coronation.
It's one of the top 3 hardest environments in the sport. The noise is just a physical thing there.
It is. It impacts communication. It impacts timing. Everything is harder.
But it wasn't a coronation. South Carolina 28, Clemson 20. And the way this game played out, I want to zoom in on the fourth quarter. Because in rivalry games, usually that's when the depth takes over. That's when the home crowd breaks you.
The fourth quarter is where you measure that foundation we talked about at the top of the show. It's not about the fancy plays in the first quarter. It's about who can line up and punch the other team in the mouth when everyone is tired and hurting.
And South Carolina won the fourth quarter 14-0.
14-0. They shut Clemson out when the pressure was highest. That isn't just wanting it more. That is superior physical conditioning and superior schematic adjustment. The coaching staff saw what Clemson was doing, and they countered it perfectly in that final frame.
Let's unpack the schematic side. The defense held Clemson, again, the number 2 team in the nation, to 42 rushing yards on 19 attempts for the entire game.
That's less than 3 yards a carry.
It's insane. It puts the entire burden on the quarterback.
Exactly. They made Clemson one-dimensional. Look, Jonas Williams threw for over 300 yards, sure, but he was under duress the whole time. He was throwing because he had to, not because he wanted to. South Carolina made them play left-handed. And look at the situational football section of our notes. This is where the game was actually won. 4th downs.
This is a killer stat. Clemson went 0 for 1 on 4th down. South Carolina went 3 for 3.
That is the difference between winning and losing right there. It's that simple. Those 3 conversions for South Carolina extend drives. They keep the dangerous Clemson offense on the sideline. They quiet the crowd. They drain the clock.
And that one stop.
And that 0 for 1 stop on defense, that's a turnover. It's a massive momentum swing. Those are the hidden yards that A.C. Jordan preaches about constantly. In a game decided by 8 points, those 4 specific plays are the entire margin of victory.
You can't just look at the total yardage. You have to look at those leverage moments.
Always. And who made the plays in those moments? For South Carolina, it was Sua Tafisi, 12 tackles, 3 TFL, a sack. Marcus Eason had 13 tackles. The linebackers were flying to the football and finishing plays.
We have to talk about the moment. Every rivalry win has one. The go-ahead score.
Jermaine Paul to Kyle Bynes.
Kyle Bynes. A senior redshirt, a guy who has been a Gamecock his entire career. He's seen the coaching changes, he's seen the losing seasons, and for him to catch the go-ahead touchdown in the red zone, it's just unbelievable.
It's poetic, certainly, but from a football standpoint, it showed immense trust. Jermaine Paul didn't force the ball to a superstar. He didn't try to be a hero. He went through his progressions. He saw the coverage. He saw Bynes finding a soft spot in the zone, and he delivered a strike. It was a routine play executed perfectly under maximum pressure.
And that's the difference, right? It's not about the highlight reel play. It's about the right play.
It validated the entire season. You know, if they lose that game 2014, everyone says, good effort, tough environment, maybe next year, a moral victory.
But winning it, what does that do?
Winning it shifts the program from a rebuilding story to a national data point. It proves the foundation wasn't just talk. It's easy to talk about culture in August. It's easy to talk about toughness when you're beating up on a non-conference opponent. But to go into Death Valley against a playoff-bound rival and physically beat them up in the fourth quarter, that is proof of concept. That gets the attention of every recruit in the country.
I want to step back and look at the arc of the season now, because we have the ending, the Clemson win, the bowl win. But to understand how they got there, we have to look at the path. It wasn't a straight line. The internal review documents break the season into 3 distinct phases.
Right. And I think that's a smart way to look at it. You had the early season dominance, beating NC State 59-14, beating Tennessee 52-7.
Those games felt like a fever dream at the time. I mean, the Tennessee game especially. They just looked so fast.
They established the identity right out of the gate. Beating a team like Tennessee by 45 points, that showed the offensive ceiling. It showed that when this tempo is clicking, they can score 50 on anybody in the country. It built confidence early that the system works. It wasn't just theory anymore.
But then came the adversity stretch, the losses to Alabama and Arkansas, and those really tested the team.
And those were very different kinds of losses, which is important to distinguish. Alabama was a physical measuring stick. They lost 35-13.
They just got pushed around a bit.
Yeah. It showed the gap that still existed at the line of scrimmage against the absolute elite. The skill players were there, but the trenches were still a year away from matching the Tide's depth. Arkansas was a shootout, 42-35. That shows some defensive lapses, some communication breakdowns in the secondary. Those were learning moments.
But then, week 12, the Oklahoma game.
This is the game that I think defined the culture more than any single win.
I think I agree with that. It was an incredible football game. South Carolina versus #1 Oklahoma. The Sooners ended up winning the SEC. They were the #1 seed in the playoff.
The best team in the country.
And South Carolina loses 38-37, but it comes down to the final seconds. South Carolina scores a touchdown. They are down by 1 point.
And this is the moment where a coach defines his tenure. A.C. Jordan could have kicked the extra point. You're at home. The crowd is going nuts. Maybe you take your chances in overtime. It's the safe call.
A lot of coaches play for overtime because it protects them from criticism. If you lose in OT, it's seen as a coin flip. If you go for 2 and miss, you're the villain.
Yep.
The fans and media crucify you.
Exactly. But A.C. Jordan kept the offense on the field. He went for the win right there. No hesitation.
They didn't get it. They lost the game.
They lost the game. But look at the reaction. The locker room didn't fracture. The recruits didn't bail. The message that sent was loud and clear. We are here to win, not to survive. It was an aggressive, confident, forward-facing decision. It told the team that the coach believed they could beat the #1 team in the country on one single play.
The belief is almost more important than the result in that moment.
In the long run, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even though the play failed, the belief stuck. It resonated nationally more than a safe loss in overtime would have. People saw that and said, okay, something different is happening in Columbia.
And usually after a heartbreaking loss like that, missing a 2-point conversion to beat #1, you see a massive hangover. The next week was a classic trap game. Mississippi State, on the road.
Sarkville, at night, the Cowbells. A 3-7 Mississippi State team that had absolutely nothing to lose and would love nothing more than to ruin your season. That is the recipe for a disaster. A young team comes out flat, feeling sorry for themselves about the Oklahoma game, and they get upset.
You've seen it 100 times.
100 times. But that's not what happened. South Carolina won 48-22.
And the defense took that game over. We talked about the offense in the bowl game, but against Mississippi State, the defense scored 3 touchdowns. 3!
It's just insane. A blocked field goal return and 2 fumble returns.
A blocked FG return, 2 fumble returns. That is just, it's wild.
That is opportunism. That is being locked in when it would be so easy to be checked out. And we have to highlight Stephon Robinson in that game. 4 forced fumbles.
Wait, let me make sure I heard that right. Not 4 tackles for loss. 4 forced fumbles.
4 forced fumbles in a single game. That is a masterclass in disruption. He wasn't just tackling guys. He was attacking the football every single time. He single-handedly repped their game plan. That game, more than any other, proved the maturity of this team. Mature teams don't let a hangover loss turn into a losing streak. They get angry and they take it out on the next opponent.
So you have the highs of Tennessee, the grit of the Oklahoma loss, the maturity of the Mississippi State win, and the triumph of Clemson. The record was 10-3, but the players who made it happen. We need to dive into these stats because some of them are rewriting the record book.
It has to start with the quarterback, Jermaine Paul.
Year 1 as the starter, and the numbers are just staggering. 4,132 passing yards, 38 touchdowns. Those are both program records.
In a single season. In year 1 of a new system. And remember, this is the SEC. This isn't playing a weak schedule. He did this against Alabama, against Oklahoma, against Clemson. These aren't inflated numbers.
What stands out to you about his game, beyond just the raw yards, because he did have 11 interceptions. That's not a tiny number.
It isn't, but his poise is what separates him. The scouting reports highlight his resilience over and over. He has a short memory, which is the most important trait for a great quarterback. He would throw a pick, come to the sideline, get the correction, reset, and lead a touchdown drive the very next series.
He never let it snowball.
Never. He never let one interception turn into 3. He managed high usage, almost 500 attempts, without forcing the ball constantly. He understood when to take a check down and when to take a shot downfield. It was a remarkably mature season.
And he had help. The offensive balance and depth section of our notes is really interesting. We've mentioned Tyler Abraham, 11,117 rushing yards, 13 touchdowns, a true breakout star.
He was the workhorse.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just him. The depth is what makes this a foundation and not just a lucky year. You need more than 1 or 2 great players.
Right. And they had it. Look at the receiving corps. Levi Ekinger had nearly 1,300 yards. Ruben Roman, the sophomore, had over 1,000 yards. You had 2 1,000-yard receivers.
Which creates a nightmare for defensive coordinators.
Yeah.
Who do you double cover? You can't take them both away. It creates so many one-on-one matchups across the field.
And then you have a guy like Stephen Kirkus.
Right. The third-string running back leading the team in receiving yards against Mississippi State. That tells you the system works. It's not about force-feeding one superstar. The ball goes to the open man. If the defense takes away option A, option B and C are ready to hurt you, that's sustainable offense.
Let's switch to the other side of the ball. The defensive identity. We talked about the stats against Clemson and Georgia State, but who are the architects here? Who are the guys driving that bus?
It's the linebackers. It has to be. Stephon Robinson and Sua Tafisi.
The dynamic duo in the middle.
They really are. Robinson had 118 tackles and 22 tackles for loss. Tafisi had 110 tackles and 25 tackles for loss. When your two inside linebackers are living in the opponent's backfield like that, it disrupts everything. The running game, the screen game, it puts pressure on the quarterback.
And Tobias Wentz in the secondary, 3 interceptions, 2 defensive touchdowns, always seem to be in the right place.
And the analysis here is key. The defense wasn't about shutting everyone out every single quarter. They gave up points to Arkansas and Oklahoma, we know that. But it was about situational mastery. That's the phrase the coaches use.
What does that mean in practice?
It means tightening in the red zone. It means creating turnovers when the offense needs a spark, like in the Mississippi State game. It was a complementary defense that understood when they needed to bow up and make a play. They played their best when the leverage was highest.
So we have the record, we have the players, we have the big wins. But now we have to address the elephant in the room, the national view, and specifically the playoff.
The cost of timing, as the experts called it, a tough pill to swallow.
South Carolina finished number 13, the first team left out of the 12-team bracket.
It's a brutal spot to be in, just brutal. You look at the resume, beat the ACC champ in their house, took the eventual SEC champ to the final play. By any measure, they look like one of the best 12 teams. But the losses, they just didn't time out right. They were measured in inches, but the schedule fell just wrong at the end.
But here's what I found fascinating in the reports. There was no complaining.
None. Not a peep.
No public outcry from the coach, no whining from the players on social media, none of that "we got robbed" talk.
And that is a strategic choice, a very deliberate cultural decision. The tone was acceptance and motivation. They viewed the snub as fuel, not as a grievance. That's why the bowl game was so dominant. They took that anger and utilized it. They channeled it into preparation.
That's a sign of a healthy program.
It is, and frankly, for the long-term health of the program, being the snubbed number 13 team is sometimes better than being the 12 seed that gets blown out in the first round on the road. It keeps you hungry. It keeps that chip on your shoulder all off season.
And looking at the national landscape, the perception of South Carolina has completely flipped in 1 year.
Think back to August. South Carolina was viewed as a rebuilding project. A team with a new coach, a lot of transfers, and a whole lot of questions. An interesting story, maybe, but not a serious contender. Now, they are viewed as a beta point.
What does that mean exactly?
A data point. It means they are a known quantity that affects the national equation. When people look at the 2031 preseason rankings, South Carolina isn't going to be a dark horse or a feel-good story. They are going to be expected to contend.
They're part of the conversation.
A major part. They beat the ACC champ. They went toe-to-toe with the SEC champ. They are in the club now. They've earned that respect.
And E.C. Jordan's status has to be solidified. I mean, he made the jump from the group of 5 to the SEC without the dip.
That's so rare. It almost never happens. Usually there's a transition year where you go 6-6, you struggle with the speed of the game, you try to install your system. He went 10-3. He proved his system works against the best athletes in the country from day one.
The cultural imprint seems to be the lasting legacy of 2030. That feels like the biggest takeaway.
Absolutely. The team reflects the coach. Businesslike. Aggressive going for that 2-point conversion against Oklahoma. Resilient winning the fourth quarter against Clemson. And sustainable.
Sustainable. That's the keyword we should end on, because a 10-win season can be a fluke.
It can be. But this doesn't feel like one. It is sustainable because of the depth we talked about. Chavez, Rhodes, Kirkus, Ramon. These guys are young. They aren't graduating. The performance of the depth players suggests this isn't a one-year peak built on a few seniors. This is a model that can be replicated year after year.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into year 1, let's look at where we stand. The mission was clear. Lay the foundation.
And look at the checklist. 10 wins. Check. Rivalry trophy. Check. Bowl trophy. Check. Program records. Check. Mission accomplished.
The feeling entering this offseason isn't hype. I've said that before, but it's important. It's momentum.
And momentum is harder to stop than hype. Hype is air. It burns out. Momentum is mass and velocity. It builds on itself.
2030 proved the concept works. 2031 is about scale.
Exactly. Now you have the foundation. Now you build the skyscraper. Now you see how high you could take this thing.
For everyone listening, just think about where this program was 12 months ago compared to today. The questions have been answered. The proof is in the trophy case. And if this is just the foundation, I can't wait to see the rest of the house.
It's going to be an interesting spring. A very, very interesting spring.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into a historic season. We'll be tracking the off-season moves, the recruiting class, and everything leading up to year 2. But for now, enjoy the calm. Enjoy the confidence. The foundation is set.
See you next time.
And that's a wrap on 2030. Take care, everyone.